No, you got, there's chairs up here if you guys want to sit up here.
Okay, come up there and sit.
Is the mic on?
Yes.
Are you ready? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to this Blue Stem Group Sierra Club event. My name is Glenn Murray. I am the Blue Stem Group Chair this year. We are also live streaming this event, so we will also welcome those of you who are watching online. First of all, I'd like to thank Ryan Wells for providing his beautiful piano music for us for our enjoyment this evening. Let's show our appreciation. This evening, we will hear from Al Davis, our chapter lobbyist, and from Ken Winston, our community organizer. Then we will have a period for questions and answers. I ask that you please hold your questions until both speakers have finished their presentations. Our first speaker this evening is Al Davis. Al operated a Cherry County ranch for many years. He ran for and was elected to the Nebraska legislature, where he served from 2013 to 2017. For the last 5 years, he has served as lobbyist for the Nebraska Sierra Club at the legislature. I am pleased to introduce Al Davis, who will give us a recap of the 2025 legislative session and a review of some of the interim study resolutions. Please welcome Al Davis.
Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, to chance to speak to you today. I'm not very well organized, so just forgive me for that if you wouldn't mind. But what I'm going to try to do is kind of give you an overview of all the bills that we kind of talked about and supported or didn't support and why we did that. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the interim studies that are going on. There's 2 this week that are pertinent to energy production, for one thing. And then we have the issue of the Niobrara River, which is pretty dear to my heart because I'm from Cherry County. And you know, it's what I consider to be a threat to the Park Service there when this resolution comes out. So we'll talk a little bit also, just to start out, about the process for testifying when you're going to do an interim study piece. The way the legislature used to work, when there was an interim study, there would be a public hearing just like there is for a bill. And a few years ago, they started doing a lot more invited testimony only. Theoretically, that's designed to have people who are skilled in a specific issue that might be somewhat technical come in and talk to the senators about that. But I think it's abused today, and I don't like it. What you can do, of course, is you can call, you can write letters, you can use the online piece, which is a nice, productive way to do that. There are forms on the website that instruct you how to do that. Have you all done that before? So you kind of know what I'm talking about. So I would suggest that you do that. Read the language that's in the interim study piece, and you know, if there are things that you realize or you think are important to say, focus on those. But it's probably best to just say, don't do this. Try to have some specific reasons for why you think it's a bad idea, these things. So that's what I would suggest you consider doing. And so I'll talk now about some of the frustrations and some of the pluses that we had coming out of the session. When I was in the legislature from 2013 to 2017, it was a body that really was pretty harmonious and could really work together. So we had Kate Sullivan, a Democrat, as head of the Education Committee. We had Heath Mello, a Democrat, as head of the Appropriations Committee. We had Annette Dubas, head of the Transportation Committee, another Democrat. Jeremy Nordquist was the head of the Retirement Committee, and he was a Democrat. Then we had a lot of really good moderate Republicans on the other side. Galen Hadley was head of the Revenue Committee. And I could go down the list. But you know, it was a body that really worked well together and did not really consider much about the parties and tried to work hard for their constituents with legislation that they thought was pertinent. And I think we did a pretty good job. 2 years later, when Governor Ricketts took over, we had a sort of a change in how things were done. So I was still there, but I could see that there were some things going on that were not going to be like it was before. 2 years after that was when the big, kind of the big blow up took place, and people were stricken from their committee chairs, and new people were put in. And you may not realize a few years ago, a freshman senator was put in as chair of the committee. Well, that's just bad policy and stupid. But it's gotten to the place now where it's very warlike, and there's no trust, there's no camaraderie, there's no liking anyone. It looks to me like kind of an awful place to be. So I have to admire the folks that are willing to go back for a second trip. I mean, I gave it some thought this year, and I thought, I just do not want to go back the way it is, because I don't think you're going to get anything accomplished. So I would really hope we can get beyond that sometime and get back to the way things were for Nebraska, where people cared about Nebraska. We're not intimidated by a party that is more about getting even with someone than it is about making good economic policy and good sense. So consider that. And if you're going to write to your senators, you might say, it would be nice to have a body where you can work together for the good of Nebraska instead of just warring with each other. So that said, one of the highlights of the year was something that we did really pretty early, and we organized and put together a lobby day at the Capitol. We hadn't done that for several years, and I hadn't done it at least as long as I was working with the club. We invited people from all the other organizations to come, and I think we had about 60 people that came. We talked to them about how to testify, just like I did now a little bit with you. And then we had Ken address them, I addressed them, and then we had 3 senators come and talk about their bills. Senator Spivey, who's a new senator from Omaha, who had a climate action bill that came before the legislature, and Senator Dungan, who talked about a couple of his bills, LR 22CA, Ken?
That's right, yeah.
Which is the Green Amendment, and Ken will talk about that later. And then Senator Brandt, who was the chair of the committee, came and spoke to us. So it was a very good day. We were recognized, as the members of Nebraska's conservation voters. Not in that frame of mind, because there's an organization called that, but the folks that are interested in conservation. And that we were recognized on the floor. Then people got a chance to talk to some of their senators. So what I wanted to do with that was make people more familiar with the process, so they're not intimidated when they go up there. They know how to do it, how to call a senator out. These are basic things that you need to know if you're going to do that. So it was a great day for us. So I'm going to talk. I kind of broke this out in 2 different ways. I'm going to talk a little bit about Senator Dungan's bills that we supported. Senator Dungan has turned out to be a champion for, I guess, the environmental movement, I think, and will always be that as long as he's there. He's an easy guy to work with, very bright, flexible, good staff, so he's the go-to guy for me, at least. So he introduced the Green Amendment, and that was something, like I said, that Ken will talk to you about. He had 2 other bills that we supported. One was a bill that he'd introduced the year prior, and it was to restrict the ability of housing associations to limit the installation of solar panels. The bill came up last year, didn't go anywhere, so we reintroduced it this year and added language about pollinator gardens to the bill, so it would exempt solar panels and pollinator gardens from any kind of control by a board of the HOA. Bill didn't go anywhere, but it was a good bill, and I'm hopeful that maybe we might be able to get something done with that again. And the other bill that he put forward that we supported was one that provides for tax credits for sustainable aviation fuel. So, the Sierra Club has a sort of ambivalent view of the use of ethanol as an industry, because it tears up ground, and I understand and respect that. When we talked about the sustainable aviation fuel, the decision that we made was that if the carbon footprint of sustainable aviation fuel is far better than ethanol or an ethanol type fuel, we should support that. So we did support that, and also, of course, because it was Senator Dungan's bill. Didn't go anywhere. We'll see what happens to it in the future here. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about Senator Brandt's 2 bills, or several of Senator Brandt's bills. This one it was a big Christmas tree bill, so it was an omnibus piece that has a bunch of different things that were in it, things that we supported and things we didn't, and some things that we were neutral on too. But this is LB 36, and it contains the following pieces of legislation, which I'll talk about as we go forward. So it contained LB 309. That was a bill that was brought by Senator Hughes, and the point of that bill was to begin a battery recycling program. And this will be for all batteries, not just car batteries. Very good idea, supported by some folks in Omaha that are engaged in the waste products over there. Senator Hughes brought that. She's the senator from Seward, and it was a good bill. It got folded into LB 36. LB 459 was Senator Conrad's bill, which provided for a consolidation of weatherization funding. So, there are little entities of weatherization funding that are available for different people, and there are different departments that were in charge of that. So this put together a weatherization clearinghouse so that people can come to one place and find out where there might be funding available for them. We had supported that in the hearing, and it became part of LB 36. LB 562 was a bill that Senator Brandt had introduced on behalf of the Game and Parks Commission, and it would permit them to raise their fees. We had not taken a position on that. We were not neutral. We were not opposed. We just didn't have a position on it. So that's part of that bill. LB 592 was Senator Mosier's bill, which authorized a mitigation bank for Department of Roads. So the prior year, there was a bill to allow them to, so when Department of Roads is going to build something, if they are going to put a road through, they need to find and replace wetlands or special places, and it needs to be done in I think it's twice as much property needs to go into it. So 2 years ago, they had they got a bill through that changed the rules on that, and this was the mitigation bank. We ended up with a neutral testimony on that particular bill because we thought it made sense. What they're going to do with that is they can work with, I believe they can work with Wacheska or the Nature Conservancy rather than having to do something right close. So it enables the conservation groups to work together with them to maybe get a better outcome. We were neutral on that, and that was part of LB 36. And then the last one was LB 595, which established a cash fund for the Messinet system. Are y'all familiar with the Messinet system? Ever heard of the term? So it's a series of essentially weather reporting stations that we're trying to put in all across the state of Nebraska. It's been done through the University of Nebraska, largely INR, and significant funding has come from the federal government to do some projects along the Niobrara River. But in order to get it finished, we need funding for it. We were hopeful that we could get that done. I've been working with the University, David Corbin, and some other people on that. And when you're dealing with the university and the legislature, it's always a little bit dicey. So the university was extremely concerned that we were going to support something that might be a fiscal note, and they'd already kind of worked deals out with the Appropriations Committee and the Revenue Committee. So they asked us, please don't do that, don't do that. So what we ended up doing, and Senator Prokop was the guy that came up with the solution to that, he just set up a fund, a cash fund, that will be for, I can't think of the term that he used, but basically it'll be for funding Messinet when and if we can get the funding for it. In light of what has happened with the weather stations, and you know that Congressman Flood has tried to get funding for those in the state of Nebraska because the federal government had shut down some of the services, Messinet may have to step up and take that on. The new Messinet systems are very sophisticated. They have soil temperatures, soil moisture, soil temperature, wind, humidity. They can detect smoke. They can detect pollutants. So there are a lot of good reasons why this would be good for Nebraska. It will be a conservation piece if we can get it installed all across the state. Still a long way to go. The other bill that we played a part in was LB 317, which merged the Department of Natural Resources and the NDEE, Nebraska Department of Energy and Environment. The bill was, of course, the governor's proposal. There were 3 testifiers in favor of the bill that day. The governor himself, Jesse Bradley, who's the head of NDEQ, or NDEE, and the third one was Senator Brandt, the introducer of the bill. And then there were a slew of opponents and a number of people that wrote in online and said, this is not a good idea. So we, of course, were one of the testifiers. The NARDs, the Nebraska Association of Resource Districts, opposed it. The irrigators opposed it. The Irrigation Association, Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, a whole plethora of people. But it, of course, passed because it was the governor's request, and he comes down and gets people to do his job. So, bad bill, just a bad idea. If you look at what happened with the Department of Energy when it was merged with the Department of Environmental Quality, I think there were maybe 25 people working in, Mark, do you know, 25 or so people working in energy, and now it's down to about 5. So, it'll probably be a shrinkage of one of the entities, and we can't do that. We shouldn't be doing that. We need both. So I was disgusted with Senator Brandt for introducing the bill, but I suppose that's what his job was. So then I'm just going to kind of run through some of the bills that we also supported or opposed. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm just going to try to cut the ones that I think are important to you. These are bills that did not go anywhere, but that we participated in one way or the other. One was Senator LB 18. It was John Kavanaugh's bill, and it was one that Clyde Anderson had asked me to prioritize. It all dealt with the location of entities like a telecom tower, because in Omaha there was a sidewalk, and however the decision was made to push the tower, it became placed right in the sidewalk. So it's a crazy idea, but that's what happened. And there should be some way that you could have some mitigation so you didn't have to destroy something and make a danger for someone else. LB 23, Senator Kavanaugh provides a grant for bike sharing development. That was an idea he had to try to promote that, bike sharing, the electric bikes, in rural parts of Nebraska. We supported it, didn't go anywhere. LB 121 was a bill by Senator Hardin, who took it on from Senator Brewer, and it was the bill about banning the disposal of turbine blades and solar panels in our waste facilities in the state. We opposed it, did not go anywhere. Senator Spivey's bill on the Office of Climate Action, which I think is a good idea, but she probably didn't work it hard enough, and it just didn't go anywhere. We supported that one. Senator Quick's bill, which was to adopt the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Compact. So that is a bill that was in place years ago, or a law that was in place years ago, and it was the only bill that Senator Bill Kittner ever passed out in the legislature. And it withdrew us from the Midwest Passenger Rail piece. So that was in 2014, so we've been trying to get back in ever since then. Didn't get anywhere. That's probably my phone, I'm sorry to say. Excuse me. Oh, well. I'll have to call him back. Senator Prokop's bill, which I think is a really good idea, and it is one that permits that. So when wind and solar got developed in the state of Nebraska, it was basically illegal to do that. And John Hanson with Farmers Union and some of the other people worked hard to open the door so we could have renewable energy in the state. And we are now one of the more prominent states, believe it or not. We've still got a long way to go, but. So Senator Prokop's bill would permit storage to be developed in the same way. So how that process works, energy is sold on the open market. So you could, if you had battery storage, in theory, you could buy that energy when it was cheap, store it, and then sell it later. So the idea would be to do that in the state of Nebraska. It was opposed by Public Power, and I think it's just going to take more convincing. And you know, if we're going to develop a renewable energy issues in Nebraska, if we're really going to get anywhere with that technology, we have to have storage. It's vitally important because it's the only way we're going to get around the whole issue of what's known as dispatchable power versus on-off. Senator Clement's bill 468 modifies the nameplate capacity tax. That's on renewable energy also. And the way it is now, essentially you take what would always be the personal property tax that would be paid over a project in its lifetime. So 20 years. When you pay your personal property tax to the state, if you're a business, you depreciate that down over 7 years. So it goes from like 100 to 88 to 74% of value on down. So the nameplate capacity tax was put in place to have that be a steady flow of income to the counties. So they didn't end up with all this money 1 year and then 7 years later would be out of money. So that's the way the nameplate capacity tax works. Senator Clements wants to change that and would fund inheritance tax reduction. The reason this is a bad idea is in order for us to be competitive as a state, we need to be able to have the same, offer the same opportunities to businesses as other states. We already have a problem in Nebraska with renewables because we have so much opposition to the installation, which I think is just due to a lot of misinformation and frankly, not in my backyard stuff. But Senator Clements is determined, and that bill came within 2 votes of passing. And so I think we need to pay attention to that one this coming year. Senator Jacobson's bill, which provided for a surtax on cryptocurrency and data centers that would be built in the state and permitted them to be shut off first in case there was an outage. I didn't testify on that bill. I was going to do so in favor of it, but what happened was I was in natural resources. I think it was the same day as the merger bill. And so when I went out, that one was over, but it was very opposed by a lot of people, but it still did move forward and it's still there. And I've got a bunch more, but I think I'm probably running out of time on this. So a couple more I'll talk about. Senator Hansen has had a couple of bills to try to eliminate the Board of Educational lands and funds. And do you know what that is? That's all the school, there is a lot of school land still left in the state of Nebraska from settlement days. Every township, every 36 sections, there were 2 sections set aside for the public education. So in the eastern part of the state, a lot of that has been sold off. In the west, there's still quite a bit of it, and it does bring in revenue for the schools. It brings in, it's done on the basis of a per pupil basis. So the tax is largely paid in the west, or the rent, and then it largely benefits the highly populated districts. But Hansen wanted to eliminate that. He's got a thing about that, and I don't know why. He doesn't have any school in his district, I guess. So, any questions? Are we going to wait on questions? Is that what we're going to do, Glenn?
We're going to wait.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough about that. I think I talked about the 3 interim studies that I'm looking at that are important, 2 of which are coming up Friday. One is essentially looking at the nameplate capacity tax and how it's applied. And the other one is essentially about energy. And it's from Senator Storm, who replaced Senator Bostelman. And Senator Bostelman is a very big proponent of nuclear energy. And so we believe this study came out of his home, probably. He was the brainchild. So I'll sit down and then we'll let Ken talk.
Thank you, Al. Our next speaker is Ken Winston. Ken is the Nebraska Chapter Community Organizer. Ken is also the Executive Director for Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light. I'm pleased to introduce Ken Winston, who will give us an update on other activities the chapter is engaged in. Please welcome Ken Winston.
Hello, is the microphone on? Yep. All right, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to Aldersgate Church for hosting us this evening and for providing a live stream. And thanks to everybody for being here. And yeah, looking around, I think I recognize almost everybody. So this is exciting to have so many friends here tonight. Well, my name's Ken Winston, and actually I have an exciting announcement to make of my own, and which is to amend the description of my occupation or my position. I still am the chapter organizer, so Glenn's introduction is accurate. But I was offered the position of chapter director for the Nebraska chapter of the Sierra Club, and I've accepted that offer. And so starting October 1st, I will be the chapter director for the Nebraska Sierra Club. And for the people who asked, who am I replacing? I will be the first chapter director for the Nebraska chapter. Thank you. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the folks who helped make that happen. So looking forward to some really exciting opportunities. I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about the chapter director position. Well, first of all, some of it will be some familiar roles. I'll be doing some lobbying. I'd like to hopefully we'll continue to have Al also be our lobbyist, because Al is a great messenger for the Sierra Club, and I really think he does a great job. So hopefully he'll be able to continue in that role. But I will also be doing some lobbying along with him. And that's something I'm familiar with. I've lobbied for many years on behalf of the Sierra Club and other organizations. And unfortunately, as Al described, the legislature is not nearly as friendly a place as it used to be, even when we were in situations where we didn't have a lot of environmental allies. We didn't have outright opponents to we didn't have a majority of people opposed to our position. So it's more challenging than it ever was. But that means that we need to find better ways of working together in order to get things done. And we still can get things done, and we still are able to have some positive successes. I'll also continue to do organizing work, getting people involved in activities and doing outreach and trying to line up events and events like this one. It'll be not only here in Lincoln, but also in Omaha. And Al and I were just talking earlier today about how we need to do more outreach in rural Nebraska. We ought to be having events in Kearney and Hastings and Norfolk, and maybe take a long road trip out to Chadron and Scottsbluff and places like that. So, because the whole state is impacted by environmental issues, and so we need to be doing that kind of outreach. Of course, we also need to be efficient about things, and so to the extent we can make use of live streams and Zooms and what have you, we need to do those kinds of things. Some of the new kinds of activities that I'll be doing, fundraising. You may be getting messages from me saying, we need your help, we need your support. So fundraising is going to be a big part of it. And I have done fundraising in the past, so this is not a new activity per se, but it'll be a new role in this as part of the Sierra Club. Also membership building, we need to make sure that we have, that we grow our membership and we build our base and our capacity. And then helping the chapter create a vision for the future. I think that's going to be a big task that we're going to need to work on. And once again, that's going to be something where we'll probably be doing outreach to people and saying, what are your ideas? What do you care about? How can we best work with you to use your voice and work and deal with the issues that you care about? And then we may be doing more federal work. As we all are aware, there's a lot of really bad things happening on the federal level, and we're having to push back against a lot of that. So that may be something we may be doing more of that we haven't done in the past. Well, let me talk about some of the things that I've been involved with as the organizer, and just some other activities the chapter's been working on. First one is the Youth Climate Summit. We're going to have the 7th Nebraska Youth Climate Summit on September 26th at the Nebraska East Campus Union. And last year we had more than 200 young people who showed up. We're looking forward to another exciting event. Brittany Cooper, who's the vice chair of the chapter, has been heavily involved in helping plan it, and I really depend upon her talents and willingness to help. I'm going to actually pass around a flyer. This flyer is not finalized, so there's going to be some revisions to this, but just to give folks an idea of what we're doing, we've got an exciting keynote speaker. Her name's Lil Milagro Enriquez, and so I think she's going to deliver an inspiring message to our young people. And we also have folks like Senator George Dungan, who's going to talk about the Green Amendment, and the state climatologist, who's Deborah Bathke, is going to speak. Kim Morrow, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Lincoln. So we've got a really great list of people lined up. And then we have some workshops in the afternoon. Hopefully they'll be well attended. I think they'll be fun for the young people to participate in it. So I think it's going to be really a great event. And as I said, it's the 7th one. I hesitate to call it annual because we missed a couple years. Remember, there's a thing called the pandemic. And so in 2020 and 2021, we didn't have the Youth Climate Summit. So there's, anyway, then we picked it up again in 2022, and we've had one ever since. And it continues to grow. That's the other thing. The first one we had about 60 people there, and last year we had around 200. So it's continuing to grow, and there's a lot more involvement from a lot more people. So that's an event that I think we'll continue to work on as we go forward. Engaging with young people, I think, is really important because it's their future. Plus, they're also able to say some things that sometimes adults can't say just because of because of the fact that they're young and they're excited about these things, and so they're willing to step up. Some other areas where we've worked, Lincoln Electric System advocacy. The Lincoln Electric System recently invested in some gas generation facilities, and so we're working on making sure that they've set a goal of being net zero by 2040. And that means that they would have net zero carbon emissions by the year 2040. And 2040 is only 15 years away. And I was talking with a couple people earlier about how the years just seem to fly by. It's like, that was what? You think it's 5 years ago, and all of a sudden it's 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So they really need to buckle down, and we have a good relationship with LES management and their board, and so we're continuing to work on a campaign to make sure that they don't invest in more gas. And then another project that some of us are involved with, Brittany's also involved with this, and that's the Omaha Public Power District has promised to retire their North Omaha coal plant. They originally promised to retire it in 2014. In 2014, they promised to retire it in 2023, and then 2023 rolled around. Well, actually, in 2022, they said, oops, we can't retire it yet because we've got all this new demand for energy, and we need to keep it online. And now we're hearing rumblings that maybe, well, the Trump administration is forcing coal plants to continue to operate. And so we want to get ahead of that and say, no, you need to retire it. You need to honor your promises. You need to tell the Trump administration, if they tell you to keep it running, that you're going to shut it down regardless and take whatever actions need to happen there. So we're continuing to work on that project. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about is the Green Amendment that Al mentioned. And Senator Dungan introduced LR 22CA, which is They call it a Green Amendment, and what it is, it's an amendment to the Nebraska Constitution that would provide a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. And there are 3 states that currently have green amendments, and they've been proposed in, I think, 10 others. So, so it's not something that's really, well, there's more interest in it than there ever has been, and there's an organization called Green Amendments for the Generations that's led by a woman named Maya Van Rossum. And so they're trying to spread the gospel of the Green Amendment. But one of the reasons we're interested in a Green Amendment is because of the fact that in Montana, the states that have it are Montana, Pennsylvania, and New York. And Montana adopted theirs, I think, in the 70s, and Pennsylvania adopted theirs about the same time. And then New York adopted theirs about 5 years ago, in 2020. And then since then, there have been others that have been, where it's been introduced. But in Montana, the state legislature passed some legislation that would, I don't remember exactly what it would do, but basically it would, I think it would require coal plants to continue operating, or fossil fuel plants to continue operating. And a group of young people filed a lawsuit based upon the Montana Green Amendment that said, we have a right to a clean environment, we have a right to deal with climate change, and to have positive actions taken to protect us from the impacts of climate change. And we believe this Green Amendment gives us that right. And the Montana District Court agreed with them, and then they appealed to the Montana Supreme Court, and the Montana Supreme Court also agreed with them. So it's like, okay, we'd really like to have something like that here in the state of Nebraska. And one of the good things about the Green Amendment is that it also has been a motivational force in terms of getting young people engaged. And I mentioned earlier wanting to get more young people involved. And it's really been great seeing the way that young people have responded. I mean, last year when the Green Amendment was introduced, some young people took it upon themselves to organize a press conference at the state capitol. Well, actually, Brittany did a lot of the work helping set it up, but the young people got up. Well, I mean, we need to be real here, folks. but even though we did a lot of the background work, they were the ones who stood up in public and spoke about why they cared about it, why they wanted to see a Green Amendment enacted. And they also had some little, they had testimony writing sessions at the UNL campus and also in Omaha, so that they had got young people together. I went to the one in Lincoln and hung out with young people and talked to them about what they wanted to say in terms of the testimony. And then several people, most of them submitted their testimony online, like Al was talking about, but some of them actually testified. I think we had 7 young people who testified at the hearing, and by and large, they did a great job. And actually, there's one little story I want to tell, and then Al and I can talk a little bit more about the interim studies that are up. But I attended the hearing on the Green Amendment, and we tried to let the young people testify first. But then when I came back from testifying, I came back and sat down, and the people who had been sitting next to me, the hearing room was very small, so you couldn't get, there were people who had to wait out in the hallway. So some of the people who had been sitting next to me had left, and there were 2 young people who sat down on either side of me when I came back from testifying. And they were kind of passing little notes back and forth to each other, and at some point, I showed one of them a text I'd gotten from Senator Dungin about, related to the amendment. And so then we were all like co-conspirators. Like, okay, we're all in this together. And so this young woman who's sitting next to me on my left, she turns to me and she whispers, "Can I still testify?" And I said, "Well, sure, yeah, if you want to." Well, I said, "But first you have to fill out this green sheet and hand it to the clerk when you go up to testify." She said, "Well, here's what I want to say." And so she showed me, she had a little 3x5 note notebook, and she showed it to me, and she had all this, and I said, well, change this and change that, and otherwise it's good. And she got it and did a great job. And since then, she's helped organize some activities in Omaha, and she and one of her cohorts, one of the other activities the Sierra Club's involved with is working with, is trying to get Berkshire Hathaway to divest from fossil fuel interests. Actually, Berkshire Hathaway does lots of energy generation, mostly not in Nebraska, but in other states like Iowa, Mid-American Energy in Iowa, and they've got coal plants in several states. And so one of the young people who was involved with the Green Amendment was, my young friend and her friend got into the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, and you line up and you sign up to see if you can ask a question of Warren Buffett. And so this other young woman was able to actually ask a question about Berkshire Hathaway's energy policies, and she was the only person from the Sierra Club delegation who was able to do that. So, and some of these young people are going to be presenting at the Youth Climate Summit this fall. So it's really a great experience to have the young people involved in something like that. Well, with that, I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about the interim studies, and Al you hadn't really talked much about the interim studies, so why don't you come up and we can kind of tag team on the interim studies, and then we can, because there's 4 interim studies coming up. There's 2 coming up on this Friday and 2 coming up in 2 weeks. And the ones this Friday are LR 159, which is the nameplate capacity tax, and the no net zero, or the anti-net zero resolution, LR 234. So why don't you talk a little bit about the nameplate capacity tax?
So you heard me talk about the nameplate capacity tax a little while ago and how it's assessed. Over time, the nameplate capacity tax has been constant and fixed. So one of the things that's happened is the cost of the materials that goes into the nameplate, into the turbines or the solar panels, has decreased in cost. So the developers will say, well, we're okay with the tax as it is, but we don't want to pay more tax. So, Senator Clements and some other people that are desperate for money, they think, well, let's just talk about renewable energy. People want to kick the dog all the time, right? And the dog happens to be in renewable energy, so this is another attempt to kick the dog and get it out of Nebraska. And so, there are going to be these folks that have lined up in opposition to that. I am hopeful that, there's some incredible information that John Hanson has put together with regards to what renewable energy has done for Nebraska, not just in terms of more reliability, but in terms of tremendous investment. Bigger investment in the state than ethanol has been in terms of the facilities, the infrastructure, and bigger investment in the state of Nebraska. With more jobs, that's what I was going to say. It's done more jobs than ethanol. So what I'm hopeful that will come out of that is that the questions will be put to the senators, and we'll get a senator to ask some questions about that, so we can have at least a neutral presentation when the bill comes up.
And I'll just recite some statistics. I believe it's 2,200 jobs, at least 2,200 jobs for renewable energy, $6 billion in investment, and $17 million in annual tax revenues to go to schools and counties. Of course, one of the challenges is the fact that they only go to the counties where the projects are actually built, which seems kind of ironic that people are simultaneously complaining about how high their property taxes are and saying, no, we don't want renewable energy. Anyway.
So one of the things that John has always said, and I've really come to believe that renewable energy is really an ag-related process because it's done on the farms and ranches. So I think that's a message that needs to be pushed and can be pushed by people like you if you're writing it, and you can say this is really an ag product. It's a raw material that is available to us. And you know, my other argument always has been with regard to renewable energy is if we don't have it, we're going to be buying coal, oil from somewhere else when we can produce it right here in our own state.
What can we say about, to those people that say, they're taking prime farmland and putting solar panels on it? I mean, I would say the farmer's choice myself, but is there other arguments you use?
The best argument is, you know, this is a property rights issue. I have a right to do what I will with my farm, or would you prefer to just give me a tax deduction on my property taxes? So I think that's the best argument, but you know, the other thing is, it's about rent, so you'd be surprised at how much rent a guy can make on his farm, so he has no risk. That land is always going to be there. So if it comes to the point where that land could generate more revenue than a solar panel, you can rip that all out and restore it. And you're improving the health of that soil by letting it rest all these years and putting it back in a pollinator base or grass base. You know, we need places for pollinators so we can cultivate our bees and our wasps. And, you know, let's face it, Nebraska in large part is almost fence row to fence row corn anymore and soybeans. So it's pretty hard for pollinators to find a place to make home. And they're living in ditch banks here and there.
I guess I'd also throw in the fact that we lose a lot more farmland every year to urban sprawl. I mean, I used to live in Omaha, and recently I was up in Omaha, and then I was driving west out through all the new developments. It's like, where did all this come from? And just in the 8 years since I've lived there, there's massive sprawl that's taken place. So we really lose, and once you lose it to urban sprawl, you never get it back. And I guess the other thing is, it sounds like a lot of land, but if you really look at it in terms of the overall amount of land that's used for corn and soybeans and what have you, it's a small percentage. So, and I agree with Al. I mean, okay, you're going to tell somebody they can't do something lawful on their own land? I mean, yes, definitely a property rights issue. So
there are other things that I think are pertinent too, and one of them is this: you know, you're not going to run cattle under the panels, but if you build them right, you can run sheep under the panels or goats under the panels. And we are coming. Technology is moving so quickly. You know, there are now these robotic weed machines that you can run down the row, and they recognize what the weeds are, and they clip them off. So you're going to have the ability to have a machine that goes in there and could plant seeds around the, you know, let's just say you wanted to plant cabbages, you could plant cabbages underneath those, and then you have to go in and harvest them. All that's coming. I mean, we're on the cusp of some tremendous things technologically if we can just survive.
And then the other resolution is LR 234, which I think you briefly mentioned, but that was introduced by Senator Storm, and we think it's a stalking horse for Senator Bostelman. But basically, all of our public power districts have adopted policies that say that they're going to reach net zero by a certain date. Like LES, Lincoln Electric System, has the most aggressive one, which is 2040. The others are all at 2050. And this resolution is cast in terms of saying that, well, net zero is going to be more expensive, and well, if we do that, we're going to be in the cold and dark. And actually, renewable energy is the lowest cost generation source. And as Al was indicating earlier, the more that we can get batteries developed, then we can deal with the fact that there's intermittency. I mean, obviously the wind doesn't blow all the time, absolutely. Obviously at night the sun doesn't shine. So, but if you have battery storage, you can cover a lot of those gaps. And so, and a lot of renewable energy projects now are starting to incorporate battery storage. So the Sierra Club sent out an email today that Al and I helped put together that is inviting people to submit comments related to LR 234. And so I'd invite you to, if you're on the Sierra Club email list, I'd invite you to go look at that, and there's some suggested talking points that you can use. And that's this Friday. Both those resolutions are going to be heard this Friday. But if you want, and it is invitation testimony only, which I could go into a long rant about what a terrible idea that is, but I'm
I
going
already did that.
I know you did, but I just wanted to second that notion. So anyway, let me finish my thought, and then I'll get to you, Larry. Okay. So, if you're going to submit testimony online, it needs to be submitted by 8 a.m., before 8 a.m. on Friday. So if you're planning to, and you can watch the hearing, but you won't be able to testify. And Larry, I think, has a question. So can we use the microphone, because I think we're trying to.
I just wondered how
Maybe.
many different power companies do we have in Nebraska? I know Omaha's Omaha Public Power, Lincoln's LAS. We have Nebraska Public Power. That used to be Consumers up at Columbus, because I grew up in Albion, about 45 miles from Columbus, and so I'm familiar with Consumers. And I don't know what's farther west. And then how many coal plants do we have left?
Okay, there are approximately 165 total public power entities, but that's the fact that there are a lot of communities that have their own little, a lot of cities that have their own power district. So there's three big ones, and that's Omaha Public Power District, Nebraska Public Power District, and LES. And then there's also the Nebraska Municipal Power Pool. They're kind of out west. Their headquarters is here in Lincoln, but they're out west. And then there's Tri-State, which is
Tri-State's out of Denver.
Where does North come in?
Norris is their own. They're part of NPBD.
Oh, okay.
So, and in terms of the number of coal plants, I don't know the exact number, but the biggest one is Gerald Gentleman out near Sutherland.
Okay.
It's about 1,000 megawatt
What
plant.
about the one in Lexington?
I'm sorry?
That's a municipal plant, isn't it?
I don't know. There may be a municipal one in Lexington. I do know
Well, it's a Kennedy steam plant south of Lexington.
Okay, I'll take your word for it, because I'm not familiar with it.
I don't know how they're powered.
Yeah, and then Grand Island has one, Fremont has one, Hastings has one. North Omaha is OPBD's primary one, but well, actually North Omaha is their smaller one. Then Nebraska City is their primary one, and then Sheldon Station, which is down by Hallam. There are undoubtedly other ones. I don't know.
Fort Calhoun, is that the Omaha one?
That's not, no, North Omaha, it's in North Omaha, it's in Omaha.
Okay, what's Fort Calhoun?
That was a nuclear plant.
It's closed though.
It's
Another power plant.
It's a nuclear plant, but it's shut down.
Nuclear, okay.
Yeah, but it's shut down. So, hopefully,
That's one thing, Ken, that probably needs to be said is the motivation behind some people is we need more nuclear in the state, and it's these small nuclear plants that are coming, and that's going to solve all our problems. Well, it's a long ways off. The problem is now, immediately, because we have all these data centers and entities that want to come into Nebraska and use our power. And so Heath Mello, who's the chair of the president of the Omaha Chamber, told me at a meeting, he said, we can't bring any more business in because we don't have the power. And so the problem is immediate, and renewables are the solution right now.
And I'm from there, I lived and worked up in northeast Nebraska. And I know Norfolk has this plant that has an electric kiln. And if you're up in that area, when they turn that kiln on, all the lights dim in northeast Nebraska.
yeah, nuclear steel, yes, exactly. Okay, did you want to talk, let's talk about the two resolutions in 2 weeks, quick, and on the 19th. You want to talk about the Niobrara resolution?
Sure. So Senator Storer, who represents Cherry County, has brought a resolution, an interim study to look at the feasibility of having the state of Nebraska essentially step into the shoes of the National Park Service and manage the Niobrara River. So this is a long ongoing sore in Cherry County and along the river. going back to the,
Al's from Cherry County, so when he speaks about this, he knows.
so going back, you know, many, many years ago, and most of you probably know this, but a dam was going to be put on the Niobrara. So there was a lot of opposition from a lot of environmental folks who said, this is such a beautiful area, we don't want to dam it up. It was when Mrs. Smith was our representative in the western part of the state, and she was bound and determined she was going to get the dam built. But ultimately, the way they stopped the dam from being constructed was that the river was declared a National Wild and Scenic River and placed under the management of the National Park Service. So they brought in a ranger and some other staff members there. And then they decided, because it's an unusual situation where the Park Service doesn't really own land, it's not a national park as such, but it's in charge of this river, we need a local organization to work with. And that organization is called the Niobrara Council, and it's made up of a large number of people, maybe 17 or so. There's outfitters on it, there's county commissioners on it, NRD managers on it. I think there was an environmental representative at one time. Game Parks has a seat. So although it's a big entity, one of the jobs that it was supposed to do was to try to go out and secure easements along the river to prevent development. Well, it immediately ran into a buzzsaw with people there who are against easements. Senator Story has long been known to be against perpetual easements. She's been on that bandwagon for years. So I'm not surprised that this has come up. But of course, she's got the full-throated support of Mike Murphy, who's the head of the NRD, and Valentine, and some other folks. The Niobrara Council, I'll just go back to my time in the legislature. I would go to Valentine and drive up the street, and I thought, I'll stop at the Niobrara Council and see what's going on. Well, it never was open. Last year, someone...
Fraud, waste, and abuse? I'm sorry.
Last year, someone who might remain nameless contacted Foley about doing an audit, and one was done. And one of the things that Foley found was that in 20 years of working for the Niobrara Council, the chief executive officer had never taken any time off, and had never had a sick day in the entire time she worked there. Although she was out fishing one day on some lakes south of town, and she put that on her Facebook page. But she was never in the office, and honestly, the Niobrara Council, I thought what a resource this could be, but it's completely emasculated in many respects by the fact that people don't want to deal with it. So now we are dealing with an effort by certain people to strip the Park Service out of here because they don't like them, because they're not funding the Niobrara Council the way they think they should, and a few other things. But it's an ongoing long thing. Mark could vouch for that. I think you've dealt with them before. So what I hope, well, there will be a bill that comes out of this. And the Valentine paper tonight has a story about the Middle Niobrara board meeting and talking about who they were going to get to testify. Well, this is invited testimony only. So it seems to me that if what's good for the goose should be good for the gander, and I should be able to call Senator Storer and say, well, if you're going to have all these people from the NRD testify, then you need to let environmental groups testify on the same thing to give it a balance. We'll see if she'll do that. But when the time comes and there's a bill, we're really going to need your engagement, because we'll probably have a lot of Republican opposition or support of getting rid of the Park Service. I think it would be a detriment to do that because, first of all, the ultimate goal may be to eliminate the Wild and Scenic River designation. That if you want to know the truth of the matter, Valentine, Nebraska in the 80s, when I was ranching and ag was in bad shape, it was a ghost town pretty much. And the river has done a tremendous amount to revitalize the economy there. So if you take away that designation, it's not going to have the same publicity. It's not going to have people coming in from all over the country to go down the river. And it is a beautiful, unique river. If you haven't done it, you should do that. So we're going to need to fight that when that time comes.
Yeah, and ecotourism is a really big deal in the state. So yeah, we really need to protect those things.
Marv?
Where's Congressman Smith on the issue?
I think he'll do whatever he's told to do.
As usual.
Yeah.
Not sure people on the stream can hear when we talk without a mic, so just.
You could repeat or.
Or like,
what you're talking about.
My guess on that, Marv, is that Senator Fisher's probably going to be on board with what Tanya wants to do, Tanya Storr, and probably Adrian will follow along with her.
We'll avoid the rant about our congressional delegation. It's fine. I want to talk just a little bit about LR 225, which is the Green Amendment resolution. It's the same kind of deal, although hopefully, because it's a friendly senator, we'll have some good testimony in support of the Green Amendment. But we're talking with Senator Duggan about that. So I think that covers the issues I wanted to talk about.
Just picking up on what you said, Ken, I think the anti-environmentalists, can't say those awful words, have done their darndest to make a pejorative out of the term green. And I don't offer an alternative suggestion, but I think if we could come up with a way to rename, reframe, make it something that they can't just instantly attack, and especially involving young people who come with such enthusiasm and good values, and then just to get slapped over a term, a name.
Sure, I agree with the sentiment. However, I don't think I think there's been so many false narratives about caring for the earth that it really doesn't matter what you call it. I mean, but I do appreciate it. Ann's got something.
I'm thinking that you could workshop this with the youth, because look at what happened to Obamacare. I mean, he took that and they stopped calling it the Affordable Care Act, called it Obamacare. They latched onto it. Everybody liked it. Red, green, blue, everybody. So maybe there's something like Save Nebraska or Nebraska Lives, or I don't know, maybe they could workshop it and think if they don't want green amendment, but I think it's a good idea.
I've always thought we should find something with the word patriot in it that's related to caring for Nebraska. And so you know, my daughter went to North South, and when she was there, they called their environmental club Patriots Protecting Nebraska. And I've always thought that would be a great name for an environmental group. Because North South is the Patriots. Sorry, I should have thrown that in. But anyway, so.
I suppose we can't call it the woke green, can we?
Well, and of course, that's one of the challenges we're dealing with, and Al kind of alluded to it, is the fact that we're dealing with, as I said, so many false narratives about renewable energy. The idea that somehow it's harmful or that it causes property values to decline, instead of the actual true narratives about the fact that it provides property tax relief and local jobs. And if we continue to burn fossil fuels, well, I don't know what the exact number is, but the most recent number I saw for the amount of money that we send to Wyoming to buy coal was $300 million. Well, imagine we had $300 million worth of tax relief in Nebraska instead, or economic benefit in the state of Nebraska. So energy efficiency is another thing that we don't talk enough about. I mean, ways like this church has reduced its energy footprint greatly, and they've got a wonderful garden here. Well, anyway, I know that a guy named Steve Schaefer, should have him do a presentation about all the energy saving efforts that they've done. But they've saved over 20% of they've reduced their energy bills by more than 20% just by changing their energy generation methods. Their heating and cooling system. They changed all that. So, and so there's lots of things that people can do individually and as a society. So we need to be thinking about all those things as we go forward working on this stuff. So I don't know what other things we need to talk about, but there's lots of challenges, but also I think there's some real opportunities too. But one of the big opportunities is just working together with people, bringing people together. Really glad that all of you came here tonight, and Are there any other questions or comments that anyone wants to share?
I want to talk about one other thing.
Okay, Al's got
We
it.
have Mark here, which I appreciate because he follows the Environmental Trust more closely than I do. But we didn't talk about that in my bills here, and I should have. I've got it on my notes, but I skipped over it. But you may know that the Environmental Trust was essentially under attack by the governor's office last year. And Mark, can you kind of enlighten people a little bit if you've got a mic? If I don't have my notes.
Sure.
handy.
Yeah, Carl, who took over after I left 3.5 years ago, Carl came in and he was kind of a political figure who was brought in and kind of to run the Environmental Trust as the board wanted. And the board, of course, was put in by Ricketts at the time. And I fought pretty hard against a lot of those guys before I left. The good people got turned loose and didn't get renamed by the governor. So we lost people like Jerry Lawrenson and Paul Dunn and folks like that were on the board that were doing a lot of good stuff. But anyway, there has been a change. Holly Adams is now the director of the Environmental Trust, and I actually hired her to be my grants administrator when Marilyn Tabor left, and so she worked for me for about 1.5 or 2 years. Holly's going to try really hard to get back to the roots, but the current governor, Governor Pillen, is not much different than Governor Ricketts, and his policies are pushing ethanol and things like that, and stuff that is not environmentally friendly, but it's trying to get the grant money shifted that way. I guess Pillen is talking about taking the money that is gained from the interest from the trust funds this next year, introduce a bill and take all of the interest off of the trust. The trust has about $75 million in the bank, but about $40 million is spoken for. It's already been allocated from past grants. They do up to 3-year grants, and so the amount of interest is pretty high on $75 million, but he's talking about grabbing that. This last year, they grabbed a big bunch of it, several $1 million a year for the Department of Environmental Quality, NDE. Is now combined with the Department of Water Resources, so it's NWEE. But anyway, they've grabbed some money to put into their process, into their grants, which are going towards water. So they are water, but they're not necessarily environmentally friendly water projects. And I think eventually even the Perkins Canal is probably going to rob some of this money. So right now there is from the past years there have been takes from the Environmental Trust from the legislature. The trust really didn't fight it, the board didn't fight it, they were neutral. They went to the hearings and were neutral, which is pretty bad when you're having half of your budget stolen and you don't testify against it. But anyway, Holly's going to try her best. She's also going to try to get people to reapply. The last few years people have not applied. When I was there, we never had less than 125 applications a year. The last couple of years they've had 70 and 80 applications. And so they start out with a fewer number. People who were turned down year after year after year, the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, and some of those groups that were buying land or doing easements or doing projects like that just basically were getting turned away, and so they've sort of stopped applying. The Land Trust, the Nebraska Land Trust, stopped applying. Dave Sands, now Jacob's taken over that. So we're hoping in the future it starts to turn. But they have put on 1 or 2 new board members that show a little bit of hope, and so I'm hoping slowly after the Pillen years. But Pillen's probably going to be around for another 4 or 5 years. But I think as soon as the board starts to change a little bit more, we might get back to the old trust. But we're going to have to watch. They're going to continually try to attack the trust, and I think there will be more bills introduced this coming year, including the one that Pillen wants to take all the interest from the trust. So yeah, we definitely got to keep an eye on the trust. Unfortunately, it's been sabotaged by Governor Ricketts, now Governor Pillen, and the money's been used for non-environmental purposes, I would say. So, but there's some hope.
And we did have some success last year in terms of the original proposal was to take
Right.
half of their cash.
Right.
They ended up with about 1/4 of it, right?
Right. They were going to take half forever.
Forever,
And
yeah.
they ratcheted it back to 3 years to about
Right.
25%. So yeah, so we got it ratcheted back.
And that's an example of what can happen if people step up and say no, and really make sure they.
I think that's what did it. I think
Yeah.
we had a big turnout. We had some calls to action with our membership, and I think other organizations did too. And then the Revenue Committee or the Appropriations Committee backed off the original request.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. The trust is really an important tool. For
Yeah,
Nebraska.
many states are very envious of the trust. We're making about $25 million a year turning around and putting out on the landscape. And it would start out to be for small projects, and all of a sudden it got to go to big projects, and then it got to going to projects that weren't environmentally friendly. So yeah, so the use was prostituted pretty quickly and unfortunately got out of hand.
And it's been in place since 1993, and
Yep.
really a lot of good stuff has happened because of the Environmental Trust. And it's all funded through lottery dollars. No tax dollars are involved with it. So
And they do not get any of the lottery, the casino money now. So there's people thinking, oh, it's going to really jump up. Actually, it's going to start going down a little bit because casino revenue has already been spoken mostly for property tax relief. But the original lottery, Powerball, Mega Millions, scratch tickets, those all still will go to the Nebraska Lottery, will go to the Environmental Trust, but they will not get any of the casino revenue that's coming up now.
Well, I assume everybody's gone out and bought their Powerball tickets.
They're selling like hotcakes these last few days. Yeah, over $1 billion now is the Powerball. Mega Million tickets, unfortunately, went to $5, but Powerball are still $2. So yeah, there's our pitch.
Any other questions?
Appreciate you folks coming out.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, you too.